In this video, I'm going to show you how simple and easy it is to create realistic animations in Adobe Photoshop. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and you're going to love this one. In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to create realistic looking animations using Adobe Photoshop. Now, we're going to be talking about a process called rotoscoping. Now, rotoscoping is a technique of animating that uses actual film. So we use film and then we trace over the top of that film and then remove the film to leave only the animated sequence in place. And of course, the result is a very realistic looking animation. Now, rotoscoping has been used in lots of different videos that you've probably seen. One of the more notable videos is the Aha video from the 80s. It was also used in Cinderella, Fantasia, more recently a movie called A Scanner Darkly. So rotoscoping is used quite frequently. I even think that there was maybe some commercials that were released not too many years ago that used rotoscoping. It's a really, really cool effect. And when everybody sees it, they're like, wow, how did somebody do that? Or they think it was just some filter that was applied. It's definitely not a filter that was applied, and it is time consuming to create animation like this. But like I said, it's very easy and anyone can do it. Now, in my last video, I created a video on tracing, and we talked about whether or not it's appropriate to trace if you're an artist. Now, if you missed that video, I'll pop a link popping up on the screen right now, and I'll also link to it in the video below so you can go check that out. But in that video, I did 3 different rotoscoped sequences. Now, I'm not sure many folks picked up on the fact that these rotoscope sequences were actually created through tracing, which is ironic because the video was about tracing, and I created these sequences by using tracing. Lots and lots of tracing in order to create those sequences. But like I said, if you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out. It's a really cool video, and it also is a little bit controversial, and also you can weigh in on whether or not you think it's cheating to trace or not. But anyway, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a rotoscope animation in one of the more recent versions of Photoshop, and you're going to see just how easy it is. So before we go into the process of creating a rotoscope animation in Photoshop, we probably need to first understand what rotoscoping actually is. Now, rotoscoping is the process of using some type of film and using that film as basically a tracing base. And then over the top of that base layer, we trace over the top of the film. And each frame that we would normally draw by hand instead is traced, and then that is the resulting animation that we create. Now, of course, with modern technology and the programs we have at our disposal today, we can take that film out of the final export and we're left with only the drawings, or we can leave the audio in, or the film, we can leave the film in, of course, and create animation over the top of the film as well. So that's basically how the process works. Now, of course, just like with traditional frame by frame animation, each one of these frames is hand drawn over the top. And in this case, I'm using a Wacom Cintiq tablet/monitor to do so, which really makes the process a little bit faster because I can actually take the digital pen and contact the surface where I'm actually making a mark, much like I'm drawing on a sheet of paper. Now, you can also do this process obviously using a tablet. You can even use your mouse. So don't let the peripherals that you may have or may not have stop you from creating this wonderful form of animation. All right, so the first thing we need to do is go ahead and open up Photoshop. Now, I'm using Photoshop Creative Cloud 2019. I realized that at the date of creating this video, it's 2021, but I like using the version of Photoshop that I'm most familiar with, and right now it's 2019. All of the more modern versions of Photoshop, this is going to work in, and it's very simple to do as long as you get your document set up and everything. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first thing I need to do is open up a video file. So what the way rotoscope animation works is it works with a video, and you trace over the video, and then you can remove the video if you want, or you can keep the video in the background for the audio, or you can have the video peek peeking through in areas if you want of your animation. So we're going to go ahead and open up a video file. And here's the file we're going to use. It's just a little hummingbird here. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click on that and open it up in Photoshop. Now, what you'll notice here on your screen is I have my timeline down here at the bottom. And automatically, when we pull it into Photoshop, we can see that by scrubbing over this timeline, we can see the video and we can see it's animated, or well, it's obviously animated because it's a video. We haven't animated anything yet. So if you're not seeing this timeline down here at the bottom, you can go up to Window and make sure that timeline's checked. So you can see if I click on that, the timeline goes away. If I click on it again, the timeline comes back. So we need to make sure that we can see the timeline. That's very important. Now, just a few things here in the timeline. You have a play button. You have a couple of rewind and fast forward options, or you can move. Well, it's not really fast forward. You can move forward a frame, and you can also see our stack basically down here. We have video group 1 at this point, and there's also a track for audio. Now, down here at the very bottom of the timeline, you can see our frame rate, which is right now 23.976 frames per second. And there's also a small mountain and a big mountain, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is the frame rate, which is currently 23.976 frames per second. That means if we were to create a animation, we would need to create approximately 24 drawings per second of animation. Now, while that will create some super smooth animation, it will take an unnecessary amount of time. So we can change our frame rate to a frame rate that uses less frames per second so that our hands don't fall off when we start the drawing process. Now, to do this, we have there in this lower timeline here, you can see over on the far right of the timeline, there is a stack of several little lines, or a stack of several little bars. By clicking on this, this will open up some options for us, and we want to look for set timeline frame rate. So when we click on that, this little dialog box pops up, and we can see our current frame rate right now, 23.976 frames per second, and we can go ahead and change that. Now, I like to work with 12 frames per second. I feel like that is a good number to create some smooth animation, and of course, it will allow us to do so without sacrificing too much quality or creating an animation that's not extremely jerky. So we'll go ahead and click on 12. And then when we click OK, you'll see that our timeline changes a little bit. It's still the same. It's still the same speed at the playback. It's just a little bit more choppy now because, of course, we've halved the number of frames. Now, of course, right now when we're looking at the timeline, we can see that we've got these numbers at the top indicate the number of the frame number that we're on. You can see it goes to 32 to 64 at 96. We need to zoom in a little bit closer so that we can take each frame at a time. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Now, to zoom in a little bit closer to the timeline, all you have to do is pull this slider back and forth, and you can see as we move towards the larger mountains, of course, we're zooming in to the timeline. Now our frames up here at the top, they're singular. So we've got 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. I'm going to find a good frame to start with here, and we'll just do one of these guys right here. I'm not going to do the entire animation. I'm just going to show you a couple of frames so you can get an idea of how this works. Now, we could start drawing on this at this point, but that would be a mistake. We need to create different layers to work on, just like with any other document that you might work with in Photoshop. And we're going to stack these layers to create the animation, which is really cool. But to stack those layers, we need to create some special layers in order to do so. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to Layer, and then we're going to scroll down to Video Layers, and then out beside Video Layers, we're going to click on New Blank Video Layer. And when we do that, you can see here in the video group or in our layers palette over here, right underneath the video group folder, we've got layer 2. We're going to go ahead and pull that out of the video group and up on the layer above. Now, if we look in our timeline, we can't see anything is there. We can see layer 2, but we can't see anything is there. And that's because we need to scroll out a little bit. And Photoshop has dropped layer 2 way over here. So we're just going to pull it back so it matches up with our video. So now we have a layer on top of the video layer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and draw. We're going to make some marks here, and we're going to do so on layer 2. So you want to make sure layer 2 is selected here before you start making marks. Now I'm going to choose a brush. I've already got a brush selected, but the brush size is too large. So we're going to bring this down a little bit. That's probably too small. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start tracing over the bird. Now keep in mind that when you're doing your own animation, if you decide to do this, that each drawing is going to take you a few minutes to complete. And since we're dealing with 12 frames per second, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you start thinking about how many drawings you're going to need to create, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So just think about that when you're creating your tracing here, when you're drawing, because for every drawing that you create, it might take you a few minutes, of course, and it can end up taking lots and lots of time to create the animations that you might want to create here using this technique, of course, but it's worth it. It all pays off in the end because the animation that's created using this technique is really, really cool. I think it's really, really cool. All right, so I'm going to put a few indications of some of the texture there on the belly, but not get too carried away with the details. And we'll go ahead and draw the branch. Now we could put this branch on a different layer and let it be a still part of the scene. So you can put it on a different layer and just let it be there. And I'll show you how we are going to be able to have a layer that doesn't change from frame to frame in just a minute. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and trace the branch. It'll give the branch a little bit of life to here. All right, so now what we can do is we can hide the video layer and we can kind of see our sketch there. It's obviously on a checkered background, and the sketch might look a little bit rough at this point, but that's okay. When we're talking about 10 frames or 12 frames per second, this is going to go by really quickly in front of the viewer. Okay, so right now we've got that checkerboard pattern, and that's not super cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a different image and put it in between layer 2 and the video layer. And that's going to, of course, make it look like we're creating this drawing on a sheet of paper. Now, what I want to show you here is if I click on the next frame, you can see I'm on frame 12 here. And if I zoom in and if I go to frame 13, the drawing is missing. And that's because we created that special video layer. So this is going to allow us to create another drawing on this frame. And we'll eventually have a little bit of a sequence going here, and we'll have a little bit of an animation happening here. But the next thing we want to do, of course, is bring in that background. And we want to make sure that background actually stays stationary. So I'm going to open up a different file. Okay, so I've got another file opened up, and this is what we're going to use for the background. So you can see here at this point, we've just got the line drawing, but there's no background. So we're going to go ahead and grab this. So I'm going to just grab it and pull it over here into our other document. And when we do so, you'll notice that it created a new layer here, which is exactly what we want. So we'll go ahead and get it in place. And of course, we need to change the layer order because right now layer 3 is on the top, and we need to make sure that our line drawing is on the top there. So when I move layer 3 down, you can see that now we have what appears to be a line drawing on a sheet of coffee-stained paper. So what we need to do is we're going to go ahead and create another frame in just a minute, but I want to show you how you can add a little bit of color to this without disrupting the lines of our first layer. So to do that, you'll remember that we created a special layer in order to have a single frame that we can draw on. So we're going to do that again. We're going to go up to Layer, And then we're going to select video layers, and we're going to create new video layer new blank video layer. And there we go. Now we've got layer 4 there, and conveniently has been placed underneath layer 2. Now, one thing you'll notice again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when we do bring in a new layer, Photoshop kind of just throws it somewhere in the timeline, and sometimes we have to make adjustments. As you can see, Photoshop pulled that layer in that we made the background and just did not fill up the entire timeline. So we'll go ahead and pull that out. Now we'll go back to layer 4, and this time we'll add a little bit of color here, and I'm just going to get a little bit creative. So well, I'm not going to get too creative. I think this bird had maybe a purple throat here, or purple head. So we'll go ahead and fill that in. We'll make our brush a little bit larger now. So again, I'm working on layer 4 now, and now I can go ahead and fill in a little bit of color, and I won't have to worry about staying too much into the lines. I really like the kind of looser look that happens with rotoscope animation, or the looser look that you can exploit with rotoscope animation, and actually went far out of the upper part of the head there. And we'll make these wings purple. And again, just real loose and quick. And you can imagine if you're doing hundreds and hundreds of these frames, you want this process to be loose and quick. And also, since we're doing a bird in motion, it definitely doesn't hurt to allow that to be kind of loose and fluid, because that's going to help create the illusion of movement. Now, I'll add a little bit of green down here, just to give it a little bit of pop and interest. And of course, I could add other colors if I wanted to. But as you can see, when we go to the next frame, we'll go ahead and zoom in again. All of that has disappeared. So we'll go back to the frame that we started on. Now, of course, it's time to draw another frame, so we'll do that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next frame, and I'm going to hide the layer that has our piece of paper on it, our background, and I'll bring back the video layer so that we have something to look at. Then we'll make sure we're on layer 2, and then, of course, I'm going to go back and use the pen here and do a little bit more tracing on this next one. Now, if you're to keep your workflow going quickly, what I would suggest doing is going through and doing all of the line drawing first, and then go back and add color, and that will allow things to go a little bit quicker. Yeah, but I'm just going to show you a couple of frames here, and we'll take it from there. So again, this is the next frame, and you can see that there's some looser movement there captured by the video. So we're going to do the same thing with our line drawing here. All right, obviously after we have our line drawing, we can take a look at what it looks like with the background. And I'm just going to do just a couple more frames here with the line portion of the process, and then we'll go back and add a little bit of color, and then we'll have a look at what we've got. All right, so now that we've got a few frames drawn with the black ink, we'll go back and add a little bit of color, and we'll make sure that we do this on layer 4. So we'll go ahead and select layer 4, and then I'll go back here, and we'll go ahead and start with the purples and the greens. All right, now that we've gotten a little bit of color in there, we've got a few frames drawn, we can kind of take a look at what this is going to look like, or at least get an idea. We can scrub back and forth and kind of get a slower version of it, but we've only done a few frames, so don't blink or you'll miss it, but let's have a look at this. All right, did you see it? It was really short and really quick. But you can see we're starting to get that that movement, that feeling of animation that's happening here, which is really cool. And we were able to accomplish this in just a few minutes. But you can imagine if we really spent some time here, you can really take things really, really far. And we'll talk about exporting your video in just a minute, but I want to show you some other examples of how you can get creative with your rotoscope animations. With the power of Photoshop, you really are unlimited as to what you can do and how creative you can get with your rotoscope animations. All right, so here's one of the sequences that I did for the tracing video, and this, of course, was meant to look like oil paints here, and I used some of the brushes that are available in Photoshop for free. These are from Kyle's brushes, which a few years ago, I think Kyle's brushes and Photoshop got together. And now we have all of these wonderful natural-esque brushes that are available in Photoshop for us to use. And this was one of the oil brushes. But I want to call your attention over here to the layer palette where we've got our different layers. You can see I've got layer 2, layer 4, layer 6 all stacked up here. So these are the top layers. If I hide layer 6, you can see that that was just a static brush stroke in the background. And then layer 4, of course, had a bit of information on it closer to the start of the video, but most of the work was done on layer 2. Now, if I had all of this, you can take a look at what video I used to work from here, and I can kind of scrub back and forth, and it is simply just me talking there, which is kind of boring, but of course, by adding a bit of animation there, it makes it a little bit more interesting. And you can see how all this is stacked up here in our timeline down here at the bottom. Now, if we scrub back and forth, you can kind of get an idea of how this all plays out here. In fact, we'll do a quick playback.
And even if tracing does become a tool in your artistic toolbox, you should continue to practice drawing and continually hone your skills.
So you can see this was quite a number of drawings here just for this little segment now that you understand the process. Now let's take a look at another version that I created. All right, so here's another example here. This is just meant to look like pastels, soft pastels on pastel paper. So with this particular sequence that I did, I had to create several different layers. So there probably 3 layers here. One layer was the clothing and just the skin tone and the hair, including facial hair. Then there was another layer for the highlights and shadows on the face. Then another layer for the eyebrows, nostrils, eyelids, and mouth. And so it took several pass-throughs in order to create this little segment here. I'll let it play for a second.
As a subject, this process of improving is hindered. Tracing doesn't directly improve our observational drawing skills.
So once you get into the rhythm, it goes pretty quickly. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not quick at all. It is a slow process, but it's definitely worth it in the end. Let's take a look at one more example. Okay, and obviously in this example, you'll recognize the background. This is the same background that we used for the demonstration there. But with this one, I wanted it to get really sketchy and loose here, and you can kind of see here as I'm scrubbing through here that I played around with some of the different layouts, or the mark making, I should say, not the layouts. You can see here I'm allowing my hair to get a little wild there. So from each frame to the next, you can get creative within each one of the little frames there as to what you're going to do and how you want your final animation to look like. So hopefully those creative juices are just going crazy at this point, and you've got some wonderful ideas for some rotoscope animations that you can create now that you know the process, and now you can see that the process is actually attainable. It's very simple to do, actually. It's just time consuming. All right, now we've had a look at several examples, and I'm sure you're excited to get started on your own rotoscope animations. But what do you do after you've finished drawing all your frames and you're ready to export your video? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that now. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our file is, of course, saved. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go up here, and we're going to go ahead and select Save As, and name this Roto Test here, and we'll just save it as a Photoshop document. And periodically, as you're working through your animation, of course, you're going to want to save frequently because this is rather intensive on the computer. It can crash, and you don't want to lose all the drawings that you've created during the process. So I like to draw 4 or 5 frames and then save, and then 4 or 5 frames and then save. All right, let's say that your animation is complete and you're ready to export your animation. Of course, we've only done about 5 or 6 frames here, but let's pretend that it's finished. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to File, and then we're going to go to Export, and then we're going to go down here to Render Video. Okay, so obviously you can change the file name if you want. You can choose your destination folder, but what we want to be more concerned with down here at the bottom is how Adobe Media Encoder is going to be handling the export of the file. Now, we worked with a document frame rate of 20 or 12 frames per second, but let's say we want to export the document as a frame rate that's going to work for the video that we're editing, for example. So we can change this to 24 frames. We can change it back to the frame rate that we want it to be. Now, this will not affect the actual the frame rate in the video. It'll just actually make it work for 24 frames per second. And we want to make sure that we export it so that we are getting the correct frames that we've drawn. Now, at this point, we drew, let's see, we went from, looks like frame 8 to frame 15. So let's go ahead and go with frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 to frame, we'll just do 16. So we're going to only export 8 frames, and then we'll go ahead and click Render. And that was extremely quick because, of course, we are only exporting 8 frames pretty much. So let's open this up and have a look at what we got. All right, so here's our exported video. And there you go. Did you see it? It was very quick, but not too bad. Pretty cool there. And let's go ahead and see if we can get this to repeat so that we can watch it over and over again there. So pretty cool animation effect there with Rotoscope there. And of course, you can get super creative with this and make all kinds of cool stuff. Now, when you export it with the base layer in place, of course, it's going to include the audio. So if your video has any audio included in it, it's going to export that with the animation, which is really nice. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're excited about the rotoscope animations that you're going to create in Photoshop. As you can see, it's a simple process. It's just time consuming. Now, I used to do rotoscope animation with my students when I was still in the classroom in high school, and I taught an animation class. Now, the students did a tremendous job always. They loved the project. And as long as they did their assigned frames, they were successful, of course. But as you can see, it's a simple project. It's a simple process, and anyone can do it. Now, if you're new to the channel, why not subscribe? We cover a broad variety of drawing and painting subject matter here. And make sure that you click on the notification bell so you're notified whenever a new video is posted. Now, if you think we just post videos on YouTube, I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. We have an incredible program over at thevirtualinstructor.com, which includes a variety of drawing and painting courses, weekly live lessons, weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. Now, this membership program starts everyone out with a week-long trial, so you can check out the program for free for a week and see if it's right for you. It is absolutely fantastic. There is a link in the description below if you want to check that out. Now, if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free and just have a little peek at that, you can definitely do that as well. I will leave a link in the description below for that as well. And again, that's 3 free course videos and ebooks. Thanks again for watching. And as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.